Dear viewers, this video is section 3, part 1 in the 5-section series on germs, friends or foes in the Medicine for Anyone in the YouTube channel. Microbe spread. An airborne microbe benefits from a host who is well enough to continue their daily routine and so keep its chain of infection alive by passing microbe offspring on to other susceptible hosts. So, while only causing us mild discomfort, common cold like viruses colonize our nasal passages, making our noses run and tickling local nerve endings to trigger our sneezing reflex. This ingenious strategy produces a fine spray of tiny virus bearing droplets which remain airborne for long enough to infect a whole classroom, bus, or train carriage full of people. And even if other airborne microbes like flu and measles viruses eventually confine us to bed, thousands of microbes have been shed by the host during the incubation period, well before the illness takes hold. Microbes that cause gastroenteritis have found a very efficient way of traveling from one victim to another through fecal contamination of food and drinking water. While reproducing in our gut, rotaviruses kill the lining cells, producing large raw areas which can neither absorb nor retain fluids. So, body fluids leaking into the gut mix with dietary liquids, causing the profuse watery diarrhea we all know and dread. This efficiently flushes the viruses back into the environment, and with each gram of feces containing around 10 power 9 of them, it is not surprising that the microbe easily finds another host, particularly in developing countries where around a billion people still have no access to clean water. Some microbes are too fragile to survive in the outside world for long and so have to pass directly from one person to another. One of these, the infamous Ebola disease virus that infects humans from an unknown animal host in Africa. Note: Ebola virus disease. Based on similar viruses, they believe EBD is animal borne, with bats or non human primates being the most likely source. Infected animals carrying the virus can transmit it to other animals like apes, monkeys, and humans. It causes explosive epidemics of the highly lethal Ebola virus disease, the largest ever being in 2014 to 16 in West Africa, when it claimed over 11,000 victims. The virus punches holes in capillaries and blood teeming with viruses, oozes into tissues and body fluids. So, while the patient is prostrate with high fever, severe pain, generalized bleeding, and catastrophic vomiting and diarrhea, the viruses in body fluids take the opportunity to pass to unsuspecting family members and hospital staff. Other directly transmitted microbes, such as those that cause syphilis and gonorrhea, have found a niche in the warm, moist surroundings of the human genital tract, exploiting the basic human instinct for procreation as a highway between victims. Many highly successful microbes use living vectors, that is, vehicles, to ferry them between hosts. Often, a biting insect will oblige by ingesting the microbe while taking a blood meal from one victim and then injecting it into the next. Vector transmitted microbes often have complicated life cycles with essential steps in the vector and the host, so both influence the evolution of the parasite. The life cycle of the malaria parasite in humans has evolved to maximize its chance of being picked up by an Anopheles mosquito, the only insect that can transmit the disease. The parasite colonizes red blood cells, feeding on the oxygen carrying protein, hemoglobin. And when 48 or 72 hours later, depending on the type of malaria parasite, the cells burst open, releasing a new batch of parasites into the bloodstream, the waste products from the parasite's meal trigger the high fever, rigors, and malaise characteristic of a malaria attack. These symptoms are severe enough to keep the sufferer lying still, so that a grazing mosquito can take a full blood meal undisturbed. So, in this case, synchronizing the debilitating symptoms with the release of a large number of new blood parasites greatly enhances the microbe's chance of survival. Malaria and several other vector transmitted microbes are restricted to tropical regions by their vectors, which require high temperature and rainfall to breed. But microbes, which are not so fussy about the vectors they use, can spread further afield. The mosquito transmitted West Nile fever virus, which can cause fatal encephalitis, recently crossed the Atlantic to hit New York in 1999. Its usual homeland are in Africa, Asia, Europe, and Australia, where it uses a whole range of mosquito vectors. The virus is primarily a bird microbe, but humans can get infected when bitten by a virus carrying mosquito. By exploiting the virgin populations of birds and humans in the US, the virus moved in a wave across the continent, reaching the West Coast, the Caribbean, and Mexico in just 4 years. So, dear listeners, by the way, this educational video is made possible by Prescribe-On, the makers of e-prescription software for digital prescriptions available freely for doctors on the website www.prescribeon.com. Doctors who are interested in this e-prescription can freely avail of its vast collection of more than 100,000 e-prescriptions. Zika virus. More recently, Zika virus, which primarily infects Asian and African primates, but can also spread among humans, began to travel westwards across the Pacific Ocean in 2007, reaching Brazil in 2013. In 2015, it caused a huge epidemic of a mild flu-like illness in South America with serious consequences in pregnant women because of spread to the unborn child. Several birth defects have been reported, most commonly microcephaly, meaning small head. The virus has now increased its vector range to non-tropical species and so is set to spread to North America and Europe. Epidemics. Most pathogenic microbes constantly live on a knife edge. They are locked into a continuous chain of infection. One break in the chain and they are dead. So, they must continuously jump from one susceptible host to another, infecting, reproducing, and moving on before the host's immune system wipes them out. Epidemics strike whenever and wherever microbes find a large susceptible group of people to infect and can successfully forge a path between them. Given the right conditions, a microbe will rip through a population, infecting and perhaps killing until it runs out of people to infect. When all are either dead or recovered and immune to further attack, the microbe will move elsewhere and only return when there are again enough susceptible people to sustain the chain of infection. In all epidemics, victims display a spectrum of disease severity varying from fatal cases on the one hand to mild disease on the other. In most outbreaks, there are also silent infections with the microbe colonizing its host without causing any disease at all. Sometimes, these silent infections form a sizable proportion of the total. In some flu epidemics, for example, up to twice as many people are infected as suffer any illness. With polio, less than 1 in 100 of those infected come down with paralytic disease. But silently infected individuals are a major source of spread to others since they may remain well and are unaware that they are infectious. Sudden acute respiratory syndrome, SARS, coronavirus. Sudden acute respiratory syndrome, coronavirus, being new to humans, has had little time to evolve with its new host and is not well adapted for spreading in the human population. It produces severe disease, killing 10% of its victims, and is spread in heavy mucus droplets, which can only travel a short distance, infecting close contacts. SARS victims are not infectious during the incubation period and do not shed the virus after recovery. The virus spread around the globe, aided by super spreaders and fast international air travel. It is interesting to imagine how the virus would have fared if it had emerged hundreds of years ago before we had any knowledge of how to stop it spreading. Would it have remained a major international killer like smallpox? Or would it have evolved into a milder form and joined the band of viruses that cause flu-like illnesses today? Host resistance. The battle between humans and microbes has been raging ever since Homo sapiens, humans, evolved and was presumably ongoing in our primate ancestors long before that. From a present day standpoint, it is hard to see how humans have been able to compete with the appearance of apparent ingenuity of microbes. But this story is one of co-evolution over thousands of years, and its history is written in our genes. Each time an infectious disease hit our ancestors, it weeded out the most susceptible, leaving only the more resistant survivors to pass on their genes to future generations. Thus, step by step, the population slowly built up genetic resistance to the whole range of pathogenic microbes, while at the same time, many microbes evolved to be less virulent. Consequently, most infectious diseases became less severe over time. Now, we are all descended from a long line of forebears who survived epidemics and spawned offspring with inbuilt resistance, and it is thanks to them that we are here to tell the tale. The evolution of resistance is perhaps most clearly illustrated by the fascinating association between malaria and the inherited blood diseases, thalassemia and sickle cell anemia. These mutations, in the case of the inherited blood diseases, thalassemia and sickle cell anemia, they cause red blood cell disorders which are fatal in homozygotes, that is, those who inherit mutated genes from both parents if untreated. They should therefore have died out over time, but they have been retained in the human gene pool because they protect heterozygotes carriers with one mutated gene from one of the parents against death from malaria. Over centuries, thalassemia and sickle cell anemia carriers survived while many others died of malaria, and the frequency of these genes gradually increased until now they are amazingly common among people living in areas where malaria is or was endemic. Today, up to 40% of sub-Saharan Africans carry the sickle cell anemia gene, and 70% of the Papua New Guinean population are carriers of various thalassemia mutations. So, dear viewers, this is the end of video section 3 part 1 in the 5-section series on germs, friends or foes in the Medicine for Anyone in the YouTube channel. Thank you for watching.